How are we doing? Welcome back to another episode of Steele Talkin Sports. I am your host, Jay Steele, and let's get talking. Welcome back. Welcome back. Let's quickly just recap that last week was terrible. Um, we had an awful week. I was very bad in all of my picks. I went 5-11. That was terrible. That brings the 2024 pick record to 33 wins, 30 losses, and one tie. So we're still in the positive after three good weeks to start, but last week was pretty bad. So let's get back on the horse. Week 4, the over-unders were 10-6 to the over, which brings the 2024 totals on over-unders to 29 overs, 34 unders, and 1 push. So unders are still the dominant play, but it looks like it's starting to move back toward the middle. Teams are starting to move the ball a little bit better, and points are being scored. And some of those points are coming from teams that you would not expect. Monday night, I know it was a garbage time touchdown, but Tennessee with Tony Pollard got a touchdown in the last minute. That got to the over. Teams like Washington are just scoring points at will. So there's points being scored in games where you wouldn't think there's points being scored. Quickly, I'll just run down last week's games. Dallas beat New York 20-15. We were on the Dallas -5.5, so that was a loss. Cincinnati beat Carolina 34-24. I had picked Carolina +4.5, so that's another loss. Minnesota takes down Green Bay 31-29. Indianapolis beats Pittsburgh 27-24. Denver with the big upset over the Jets 10-9 in a sloppy game in New York. Chicago scrapes one out against the Rams 24-18. Atlanta beats New Orleans. Huge back and forth game. That was a wild one, 26-24. First winning pick of the day was this game, Tampa, 33, Philly 16. So to start 0-7 and then finally get a W was nice, but Jesus, it was after a lot of losses. Jacksonville gets the cover against Houston, even though they lose 24-20. San Francisco beats up on New England 30-13. Washington destroyed Arizona 42-14. Kansas City beats the Chargers 17-10. Chargers did get the cover at +8. Vegas beats Cleveland 20-16. Baltimore destroyed Buffalo on Sunday night 35-10. Tennessee beats Miami 31-12, and Detroit beats Seattle 42-29. So if I just started at the Kansas City game, I went 4-1 those last 5 games, but you have to disregard the other 11 where I was 1-10. But it's a new week. We got new visions. We got new mojo. We're going to get back to it, and let's get it cracking. I'm going to share my screen. I did something a little bit different this week. Created some slides just so that I can have something to show the people instead of just showing my ugly face the entire time. So here we go. Let me just get this into full screen. Bam. All right, here we go. First game up. Tampa at Atlanta on Thursday night. Atlanta is -1.5. The over-under is set at 43.5. Here you can see what I've got as far as slides. Home record, away record against the spread here. Points per game. Tampa's obviously pretty high scoring offense in the week 1 and last week. Not so much in the middle 2 games, but they're still averaging 24.3 points per game. On the other hand, they're only allowing 19.5, 9th in the league, 6th in takeaway differential with +2. The Falcons, on the other hand, 21st with a -1 differential. You can see Tampa, 9th in the league in pass yards per game. Atlanta, 17th. Rushing, mid to low 20s for both teams. Not too impressive there. Defensive pass yards per game, both in the top 16, so the top half of the league. Rush yards per game, both bottom half of the league. So both teams give up a lot of running yards, but neither team is really good at running the ball themselves. Each team gives up a decent amount of pass yards, and both are middle to above average as far as throwing the ball themselves. At home, Atlanta's only 1-2, with Tampa just having played one road game. That was at Detroit. But Atlanta 1-3 against the spread. Obviously, this is only -1.5, so it's basically a pick 'em. Tampa's the much stronger team for me in this game. I really like Tampa Bay. I like what Baker Mayfield is doing. His weapons on offense, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, even Bucky Irving, running back out of Oregon, is starting to show that he's a pretty good player. So I like Tampa in this game. I would definitely be on the Tampa +1.5. I like the over as well. Give me 1 second. Oh, sorry, buddy. Didn't know you were back there. Sorry. Ran into my dog. But yeah, I like the Tampa +1.5. I don't have my spreadsheet open, so I'm just going to write this down. Moving on. Game number 2. This is Sunday morning in London at 9:30 a.m. We've got the New York Jets, 2-2 record. Technically the road team on the road at the Minnesota Vikings, who are 4-0. They are 4-0 against the spread, 2-0 at home, 2-0 on the road. There's not a lot that you can say against the Vikings right now. The only thing you can point out is they are dead last in the league at giving up pass yards. So they have been in some shootout games, but their rush defense per game, second in the league, only giving up 75 yards on the ground. That is highly impressive out of this, makeshift offense. And with Sam Darnold being plugged in at the quarterback after J.J. McCarthy got injured, but it has not fazed them at all. They look like an awesome team. So Minnesota -2.5 here on the road, on the road in London. Over/under is set at 40.5. The Jets, I don't know. I mean, they look good in one game. It was the Patriots. I get it. Then they looked pretty awful against Denver. I know it was a rainy, messy game, but you expect more out of Aaron Rodgers. He's played in terrible conditions for 20 years. I don't think that rain should make that offense look that bad where they only put up 9 points. So I don't really know. I can't trust the Jets offense right now. The Jets defense, pretty solid. I mean, points allowed per game, they're 5th with 15.5. Minnesota's 4th, just under 15 at 14.8. Takeaway differential, both top 10. Pass yards per game. I know it says that Rodgers is throwing 203 pass yards, but that's pretty deceiving when he hasn't looked that good. Sam Darnold, they've had short fields, so he hasn't had to put up a ton of yards. And, when you're running the ball 123 yards per game, you don't really have to dominate the game with 300-plus yard games. Now, like I said, defensive pass yards per game, they're giving up a ton of yards. That's a good sign for Aaron Rodgers. This sign is not good for Sam Darnold. The Jets are only giving up 128 pass yards per game, 2nd in the league. They're actually giving up the same number of rush yards as they are passing yards. That's pretty wild. I don't know if I've ever seen that. But the Jets are kind of having trouble moving the ball themselves. So where do we land on this game? I'm going to have to take the more experienced quarterback on the road in London. It feels like a bad pick, but I think it's the right pick. Only because, Sam Darnold and the Vikings have been perfect so far. That can't last forever. Um, Obviously, they could go 17-0. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think this is a perfect game for Minnesota to not necessarily fall asleep at the wheel, but feeling a little bit too proud of themselves, a little bit too on their high horse. The Jets have a really good defense, and I think after what happened to them in New York against Denver, they're going to come out and play really freaking tough in this game. I do expect the Jets to win this game, but I think it could come down to a field goal at the very end. Um, but it's a tough choice. This is a toss-up, definitely a coin flip, but I will be on the New York Jets plus the 2.5. Let's move on to the next game. Now we up to 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Carolina Panthers 1-3 at the Chicago Bears 2-2. Obviously, this is a very interesting game since Carolina and Chicago made the trades that ended up getting Caleb Williams to the Chicago Bears. So this is an interesting game. Chicago is favored -3.5. The over/under is set at 41.5. Panthers are 1-1 on the road, with the one win being at Las Vegas 2 weeks ago with Andy Dalton going nuclear, 300 plus yards and 3 TDs. The Bears 2-0 at home, so they're proving that they can be a tough defense at home. Caleb Williams has not been spectacular as far as a throwing quarterback, but he has gotten himself 2 wins. I think that they're starting to figure things out. I mean, getting a win last week against the Rams is a tough game. I mean, even with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua out of the game, the Rams outgained the Bears by over 100 yards. Matt Stafford was still throwing the ball all over the field. So to get that win was very impressive. I did not expect that. I liked the Rams last week. I bet the Rams, and I was surprised that they came up short. So that was, Chicago proved something to me in that game, at least a little bit. Points scored per game here, both, outside or top 20 for the Bears, outside top 20 for the Panthers. Neither team is scoring over 20 points per game. Panthers allowing the most points at 32.3. Bears, pretty good defense, only allowing 18 points per game. Takeaway differential, 0 and +2 for Chicago. Here's where it gets pretty ugly, though. Pass yards per game, 24th in the league and 26th. Rush yards, 18th and 29th. Defensive pass yards per game, not too bad. Only giving up 209 for the Panthers and 174 for the Bears. Panthers give up a ton of yards on the ground, but the Bears don't run it on the ground. This is an ugly game, but I can't back the Panthers. I think there's probably better spots for them later in the season, but I don't know if this is the one. I think the Bears are starting to turn things around a little bit, and this is a game that they should win. They've looked like the better team. Andy Dalton has had some good moments, but I think this is one where he faces a tough defense and he gets eaten up. So Bears -3.5. All right. Next up, Baltimore goes on the road to Cincinnati. Baltimore 2-2. Cincinnati is 1-3. Oh yeah, Cincinnati beat the Panthers last week. That's where their one win came from. Okay. Sunday, 1 o'clock. Baltimore -2.5 on the road. Over under is set at 50.5. Obviously, both teams have had some. Well, Cincinnati's had one good game. They've had 3 ugly games. Baltimore has been hit or miss, basically. They've looked really bad, and then they've started to turn it on. Obviously, when you run for 200-plus yards against the Cowboys, you're going to look pretty good. Both teams 2-2 against the spread. both top 10 in points scored, both bottom half of the league in points allowed, both over 22 points per game. Takeaway differential is pretty even. Pass yards per game, Burrow is throwing a little bit more, but that's expected with Lamar being able to run like he can. They're running for 220 yards per game. That's unreal. Defensive pass yards per game, though. Baltimore is giving up 257 yards in the air. I know a lot of that came from Dak's game, where we were down 28-6, and he ended up with 357 yards passing or something like that. So a lot of that was garbage time, and the Ravens were probably playing too deep prevent defense. But still, regardless, like, you're giving up 257 yards per game. That's a lot for a John Harbaugh defense. So, but if you look on the next line down, defensive rush yards per game, only 57, first in the league by far. Bengals giving up 145 on the ground. With Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, that is not a good sign if you're giving up 145 on the ground per game. I don't like what I've seen out of the Bengals. I don't think they're very good. There's something wrong with either the team chemistry or Burrow has an injury that he's hiding. But they just don't look good. I know they got, a nice pick-me-up win last week against Carolina, but it's Carolina. It's one of the worst teams in the league. You can't really hang your hat on that. And at the same time, Cincinnati now has the same record as the Carolina Panthers. So they're not very good either. Baltimore, they're starting to turn it around. Like I said, when you can run for over 200 yards on the Cowboys, that's going to build some confidence, and that's going to flow into following weeks, which I think they will continue to do here. Just with the numbers that the Bengals are giving up on the ground, I cannot see them even finding a way to stop Baltimore. So Baltimore minus 2.5 seems like a home run play this week for me. Next up, we've got Buffalo 3-1 going on the road to Houston, also 3-1. Buffalo is -1 on the road. Over/under is set at 47.5. Houston 2-0 at home, but 0-3-1 against the spread so far this season. Obviously, with this being a 1-point spread, I don't see Houston keeping it within 1 point. Buffalo scoring 30 points per game. I know they had a dud against Baltimore. Takeaway differential, look at that for Buffalo, +5. They're second in the league. Tennessee -1. They're 21st. Obviously, with C.J. Stroud, you're going to have a lot of yards through the air. He's a very efficient quarterback. They're third in the league in pass yards per game. Buffalo is pretty balanced, though. 20th in pass yards, 17th in rush yards. That takes a little bit of a dip after last week. I wish I had the numbers for just the first 3 weeks because it was pretty impressive. The only thing that's a concern, and I bet this is really skewed from last week, but Buffalo giving up 156 yards on the ground. I'm assuming a lot of that is from last week against the Ravens. But really, this game to me comes down to it's not a bad thing, but it's a little bit of a sophomore slump for C.J. Stroud. And I don't think that's anything to do with him. I think it's more that teams are learning more about him, so they've learned how to play defense against him. And that's just a part of the NFL. And C.J.'s going through that process where he's, seeing defenses a second and third time around as far as games played. And then also, the coaches just know how to scheme for him a little bit better. Last year, nobody knew how to play defense against him, and he just cooked them, throwing the ball all over the place. So this year, I think the defenses are taking away those throws, which is forcing Houston to run the ball a little bit more. And he's just not as effective quite yet. I think he'll get it going later in the season. But as of right now and this week, I don't think that's an option. I think Buffalo gets back to what they do best, a balanced run and balanced pass attack. Something like 125 on the ground and like 225 through the air from Josh Allen. That's like a perfect mix for them. They usually dominate teams that way, and if they can get a turnover, they're obviously going to be set up in the right spot. So Buffalo -1. I definitely like the over as well, 47.5. There should be a lot of points scored in that game. Next up, Indianapolis 2-2 on the road at Jacksonville, who is 0-4. Jacksonville is the favorite here, -3. That is correct. Over under set at 46.5 points. What do we think of Jacksonville? I don't really know. They look like a god-awful team. I bet they really regret giving Trevor Lawrence $250 million contract because he looks pretty bad. They have played 3 road games so far, so I guess you can take that into account. They are 2-2 against the spread. But why a 0-4 team is favored in a division game against a team who brought in a backup quarterback and looked pretty darn good with Joe Flacco. I mean, I can't say I've ever seen this either. Their points scored and points allowed is the same. That's pretty odd. No takeaway differential, but Jacksonville's -2. Look at this, though. Jacksonville's giving up 27.3 points per game. I mean, that's pretty awful. Pass yards per game, only 159. They are running the ball 126 yards per game. That's pretty solid at 13th. But look at their defense. I mean, they're giving up 272. And then, look at the Colts over here on the other side. Giving up 31st in the league, 164 yards on the ground. 235 through the air. Like, they're not playing good defense either. I think my favorite play in this game would just be the over because based on these numbers, I just don't think either team can play defense enough. But if I had to pick a side, I just can't trust Trevor Lawrence. I mean, the guy just looks bad. I don't know what is going on in Jacksonville, but it just doesn't make sense to me. I can't lay points with a team who has not won a game. That doesn't make sense. So if I had to pick a side, it would be Indianapolis. But if I had to place a bet, it would just be the over 46.5. I think that's the safer play. That way, as long as you get to the points, you don't really care who wins. And with, if I just take the points allowed per game by each team right here, that adds up to 48.6. We're getting to the over. I'm happy about that. But yeah, Indy plus the 3 or over 46.5. Next up, we have possibly the worst team in the league against the previous worst team in the league. Miami Dolphins 1-3 at New England, also 1-3. New England -1, over under set at 35.5. Look at these numbers. 11 points scored per game, 13 points scored per game. Almost 26 points allowed, 22 points allowed. Takeaway differential 0 for both teams. The only thing that Miami has going is they're 5th in defensive pass yards allowed per game, and New England is 9th in defensive rush yards allowed per game. Other than that, they're not good at anything. The quarterback situation in Miami is obviously the problem. Tua is injured. Skylar Thompson came in. He got injured. Tyler Huntley did not look good against against Tennessee. And Tennessee has a good defense, but still, it's Tennessee. You should have been able to move the ball and score a touchdown or two. They looked awful. If they can't do it against New England, then I don't know who they're going to do it against. If Miami couldn't run or score on Tennessee, then I don't think they're going to score on anybody, especially not New England. Gerard Mayo is a better coach right now for this like young team, and I think it's just a 1-point game. They get this done in New England. Yeah, I'm not going to spend any more time on that. New England -1. You play the under 35.5 because there might be 3 field goals the entire game. Next up, Cleveland 1-3 on the road at Washington, who is 3-1, possibly the best 3-1 team we've ever seen. Washington -3, over under set at 44.5. The only thing you need to talk about with Washington is Jaden Daniels. The dude looks amazing. He's had 2 games in a row with over 80% completion rate. That's unheard of for anybody. Nonetheless, that it's a rookie. They're 3rd in the league in points scored per game at 30.3. They are giving up 25 points per game, but they have the ability to just continue scoring. Like they're very efficient on offense. Cliff Kingsbury has it rolling with Jaden Daniels. Look at this. Pass yards per game, 213. Rush yards per game, 169. With a rookie quarterback and a first-year head coach in Dan Quinn. What is going on? Cliff Kingsbury went off the map and was just going to vacation for the rest of his life after he got bought out by Arizona. He's got a superstar offense. Their defensive yards here, not great. Both, bottom half of the league in pass yards allowed and rush yards allowed. But still, like, they had 15, 16 drives in a row where they did not punt the ball. Like, they kept scoring every single drive, and that lasted through 2 games. This Washington team is really good. I can't talk my way out of it. And Cleveland is not good. Deshaun Watson, not good. They have problems. Look at these numbers. They're only scoring 16 points per game. They're giving up 22. Pass yards per game, only 151. Rush yards per game, 94. 26th in the league from the Browns. That's unheard of. They're bad. They're very bad. Washington -3 all the way. Washington might score 45 points on their own. So I like the over as well, 44.5. Washington's just too good right now. Until they have like multiple games in a row where they look bad, I will play this Washington team over and over. Now we move on to the 4:00 slate. Las Vegas on the road at Denver. Both teams 2-2. Denver -2.5. Over under set at 35.5. The big talk of this week is Davante Adams being traded from the Raiders? We have not heard news yet, but it looks like that is where things are headed. I don't know if he put this out as like teams he wanted to go to, or if ESPN was just making assumptions based on teams that have the most cap space. But it looked like the Jets, the Chiefs with their injuries, the Cowboys are in play. Who else was up there? The Saints, I believe. So it's interesting. You'd have to think that Aaron Rodgers and Derek Carr, his 2 former quarterbacks, are probably the top 2 teams on the list. But if you look at both of those teams, both have a number of wide receivers, and I don't know if there's room to get them all touches without releasing somebody or trading one of those guys back to Las Vegas. But you'd have to think that Davante Adams would want to be with one of those guys on those teams because he's familiar with those. He played 7 or 8 seasons with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. We know what that connection was like for those 2 guys. And then he wanted to go to Las Vegas because of Derek Carr was his college quarterback. So he only got like one season with Derek Carr before he got traded to the Saints. But yeah, possibly Davante Adams in New Orleans. But New Orleans has a ton of wide receivers that they seem to get along with that program really well. The Jets, they have Garrett Wilson, they have Mike Williams, they have Alan Lazard. I mean, Lazard and Williams, they brought those guys in to play with Rodgers. So I don't know if there's room on that roster for Davante Adams to slide into. So that being said, I don't think he's playing this week. I do believe he is injured. I should check on that. I haven't looked at any of the injury reports. So yeah, give me 1 second. Yeah, he is listed as questionable, along with the running back Zamir White for Las Vegas. So, amid the trade talks, I don't think he would play. I think he, even if he was healthy, he wants out of Las Vegas. So I just don't see him playing this week at all. And he might get moved before game day. So that would be something. But as far as this matchup, I mean, Denver's only scoring 15 points per game, but they're only giving up 13.8. That's third in the league. Both teams are really bad in takeaway differential. Raiders are okay with Gardner Minshew pass yards per game, 212. I mean, 13th in the league. That's kind of impressive, but 31st in rush yards per game is awful. Denver is, bottom half of the league in both of those. But as far as pass defense, they are one of the best in the league with only 146 pass yards given up per game. This game is really hard for me. Bo Nix is not very good so far. So I just think after a pretty big win against Aaron Rodgers and the Jets in a nasty, rainy game, then you fly back to Denver to play this game. I don't want to say it's a bad spot for Denver, but I think Vegas is probably a bit more motivated with the trade talks going on this week, whether Adams plays for them or not this week. I would assume that the roster, knowing that news, they're probably expecting Davante Adams is on his way out. And so whether he wants to play this week or not in a Raiders uniform, I think is irrelevant. What I think is more relevant is the Raiders see the rest of the Raiders team is like, okay, we'll consider Davante Adams not a part of this team anymore, whether he's traded or not. The rest of us, let's go out here and win a ball game. And I think that's what the Raiders are going to do this week. You see that a lot of times, that like a big trade happens or a big injury happens, and you think that Team A is going to lose because they're losing one of their superstars. Actually, a lot of the times, it helps the team focus and become a more balanced offense. They spread the ball around. They seem to play for one another a little bit better. And I think that happens in this game. So I like Las Vegas plus the 2.5. I like Las Vegas on the money line. But yeah, Vegas would be my pick in this game this week. Next up, Arizona on the road at San Francisco. Arizona's 1-3. San Fran's 2-2. San Francisco -7. Over under set at 49.5. San Fran has a ton of injuries, and I don't know if they're going to be able to keep the ship afloat with all of those injuries, man. I mean, they're still top 10 in offensive and defensive scoring, 26 points per game, 20.5 points allowed, +2 takeaway differential. They're second in the league in pass yards per game, 8th in rushing yards per game. But, I mean, yeah, I mean, they're top half of the league in everything, but they're 2-2, which is weird. It seems like they should be 4-0, but they lost a tight one to the Rams, 27-24, and then it says 23-17 against Minnesota, but it was a lot bigger spread than that. Minnesota controlled most of the game. So, for San Francisco, this is just the short list. But safety, Hufanaga, wide receiver Jacob Cowing, Fred Warner linebacker, Chris Conley wide receiver, D Winters linebacker, and then obviously we know about Christian McCaffrey. I just don't know if I can trust San Francisco to score enough points. I know Arizona's 1-3. They've looked pretty bad. The only game they looked good in was the Rams. Well, no, I take that back. They looked good in Week 1 against Buffalo, but they lost that game by 6. The past 2 weeks, though, not really good against Detroit, not good at all against Washington. And all 3 of those games were at home. So they went 1-2 on their homestand. Ugh. I know those last 2 games were pretty tough. Detroit was NFC Championship game team last year, and Washington is a wagon. So I don't know. I just can't put trust in the San Francisco team right now. I know they have been good, but I just don't know if I can trust them to win by a touchdown. I know they did last week, but that's New England. That's everybody can beat New England by a touchdown, except the Bengals. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like this game a lot. I don't like it at all. But if I had to pick a side, I'm just going to take the points with Arizona. I think they keep it close. Maybe they lose by 6, and we get the cover. Next up, Green Bay on the road at the Rams. Green Bay is 2-2. Rams are 1-3. Green Bay -3 on the road. Over under set at 48.5. Sorry. Green Bay did not look very good last week. In that game against Minnesota, they got out to a huge hole, like 28-0. They did make it a game and only lose by 2 points, but Jordan Love did not look good. I think they should have kept him out for another week and let Malik Willis play quarterback. But that's just my opinion. Green Bay is 6th in the league with 26 points scored per game, but they're giving up almost 23. The Rams are giving up almost 29 points per game, and they're scoring just under 20. Green Bay has the best takeaway differential at +6. Wow. 7th in the league in passing, 2nd in rushing. Rams, on the other hand, 8th and 28th, respectively. And both teams give up a lot of yards in both departments. This is another one that I can't bet Green Bay because of the quarterback situation. I don't trust Jordan Love. I don't think he's as healthy as he thinks he is, or that Green Bay is letting on. So I'm going to take the better, more experienced quarterback and the better, my opinion, more experienced coach in Sean McVay. I would like this to be a 3.5, but maybe wait until game time on Sunday. But Rams +3.5. Also, the over at 48.5. I really like that too. I don't have a lot to say about this game just because I don't really care. I don't want to watch that game. 2 teams I don't like, and it's going to be a featured game in the 4:00 window. It's just not something I want to watch. Now this one I want to watch, and I don't know why. One of the sports podcasts that I listen to is the Sports Podcast Gambling Network. Sports Gambling Podcast Network, SGPN. You can find them on YouTube. I love listening to Ryan and Sean. They have good opinions. It is hard for me to listen to them sometimes because Ryan's a Giants fan and Sean is an Eagles fan. So being a Cowboys fan, you get a lot of hate while listening to their shows. But they provide good insight, and this is a game that I haven't bet on the Giants all season, but I want to bet on the Giants. So this might be one that I do it for Kramer. The Giants have looked pretty bad. Let's all be honest. They're only scoring 15 points per game, 29th in the league. Takeaway differential -2, 30th in the league in rushing yards per game, and then they're middle of the pack in their defensive numbers. Seattle, on the other hand, 9th in the league in points scored, 14th in points allowed. -3 on the takeaway differential is not looking good. 280 yards passing per game, though. That's first in the league. That's pretty solid. And defensive pass yards per game, 167 for 7th in the league. Now, that's a good sign against Daniel Jones because he hasn't been that effective. But Seattle, off of the loss on Monday night in Detroit, so they've got a short week. They come back to Seattle to play Sunday afternoon. It's a 6-day turnaround. Call it 5.5 if you want, considering that the game didn't end until almost midnight in Detroit. If they flew back that night, you're talking about getting home 3, 4 a.m., maybe 5 a.m. on Tuesday morning in Seattle. I just don't like that spot. I like the spot for the Giants here, being on more rest and playing a team that may be a little injured after a Monday night, a little banged up. So, I like the Giants plus the 6. I kind of like the over in this game, 43.5 too. But I would just take the Giants plus 6. Like I said, I just think this is a bad spot for Seattle, playing a late Monday night game, then having to go back to Seattle and play at home. It's at 4 o'clock, so 4 o'clock Eastern time, so 1 o'clock Pacific Coast time. I think you factor all that in. They're losing a day and a half, almost 2 days of rest on the Giants, who played at what time did the Giants play last week? Oh, they played Dallas, so they played on Thursday. Yeah, so the Giants haven't played since Thursday of the previous week. Yeah, I like it even more now. That's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. They have 4+ days extra of rest. That's a super advantage and super disadvantage for Seattle. All over the New York Giants. Maybe play the money line. Next up, my team, the awful Dallas Cowboys, 2-2 on the road at Pittsburgh, who is 3-1. This is the Sunday night game at 8:30. Pittsburgh -2.5, over under set at 42.5. This is very unusual to see Dallas 0-2 at home and 2-0 on the road. But hey, it is what it is. We're 1-3 against the spread. Pittsburgh is 3-1 to match their 3-1 record. They've only played one game at home, which they did win. At least we're scoring some points. A lot of it's been in garbage time. But Pittsburgh, second in the league with points allowed at 13. We have been throwing the ball. Again, a lot of it in garbage time. We're the worst team in the league in rushing yards at 32nd with only 75 rush yards per game. Jesus Christ. And on the other side, look at that. Defensive rush yards per game, 145 at 27th in the league. Honestly thought that was going to be worse. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, they don't pass the ball very well. They do run the ball decently well. And then their defense is always solid because it's Mike Tomlin. So what do we expect in this game? Honestly, I think Dallas has to turn it on right now. With the way that Washington is playing in this division, you cannot afford to fall behind more than 1 or 2 games to that team, because their offense is just getting better and better as the weeks go on, and you cannot afford to lose sight of the leader of the division. And Dallas doesn't have the chemistry or the offensive prowess that they've had in past years um, to just dominate teams. And so we've got to turn it on and we've got to win every game that we can. And this is one that I think that we can win. Not necessarily because we have advantages on the defensive side or like our offensive playmakers against their defensive players, but I think our advantage is Justin Fields playing quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that is going to be the Cowboys' advantage that we can take advantage of. He's mobile at times, but he's not a quick decision maker. I think if Dallas can get to the quarterback, we can come out with this game. Now I know that Micah Parsons is on the injury report. Let's see any updates on that, because that will obviously be a huge news. Doubtful. Oh man, and we lost DeMarcus Lawrence too. He's on IR. And then cornerback Kalen Carson is questionable. Ugh. Well, next man up. Next man up. You know what I'm doing? I'm taking Dallas plus the 2.5. I don't like it with Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence being out, but hey, that's the NFL. Got to suck it up. Last game of the week. New Orleans 2-2 on the road at 4-0 Kansas City. Monday night 8:15. Kansas City favored -5.5. Over under is set at 42.5. Kansas City has gotten by. It hasn't looked pretty. They haven't looked super efficient, but they haven't really done a lot of things wrong. Turnover differential, they have turned the ball over. They are -4, 29th in the league. Saints are +3 at 4th in the league. Saints first in the league in points scored, 6th in points allowed. Look at their rushing yards per game, 147. Defensively, they're also 7th, only allowing 96 on the ground. Oh, sorry. Kansas City here, right there with them at 7th in the league, only allowing 18 points per game, allowing 99 yards on the ground. But their offense hasn't been that efficient. I mean, 11th and 15th in passing yards and rushing yards isn't bad, but it's not what we expect out of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. So what do we expect out of them in this game? I don't know. This might be the hardest game on the slate for me to make a decision on. On one hand, you've got Derek Carr and his, boatload of wide receivers that just seem like he can throw the ball all over the place at will. On the other hand, you've got back-to-back Super Bowl champions. It's one of the only two teams that hasn't lost a game yet, with them and the Vikings and the Chiefs. And you have Andy Reid, one of the most creative play callers that we've ever seen in the NFL, with the most dynamic quarterback we've ever seen in the NFL. This is a hard game. I don't really know what to make of it. It's a toss-up. I think the 5.5 is too many points, but it almost feels like the line is set at 5.5 because Vegas knows that it's going to be bought down to closer 3.5 by game time. That's just a feeling that I have. I don't have any data or information to back that up, but New Orleans shouldn't be 2-2. They should be 3-1, I think. Because they lost that game last week to Atlanta on a field goal, and then they lost the previous week to Philadelphia by a field goal. So, really, New Orleans should be 4-0, and they've lost 2 games by a total of 5 points. And this is a 5-point spread. I don't know if that means anything. But, Yeah, without 2 field goals at the end of the last 2 games, New Orleans would be 4-0. And if they were 4-0 and Kansas City was 4-0, this would be a -2.5 for Kansas City, maybe a -1.5. So I just don't. I think the line is wrong. It's also Thursday, and this could be very different on Monday night by game time. But if I think that it's going to be Kansas City -3.5 at game time, then I should bet the New Orleans 5.5 now, because I could bet the 5.5. I could also bet the Kansas City 3.5. Kansas City could win the game 24-20, and I could win both bets, being on both sides of the number. I think that is the play. But I did all that talking, and I'm going to take the Kansas City Chiefs. Minus the 5.5. I don't like it. It's stinky. I would maybe play the under at 42.5, but that is my opinion. That is all that I have for today. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you enjoyed the slides that I made. I will try to continue to do that, and hope that I can beef up this podcast to be a bit more professional and a bit better, and everybody doesn't have to just look at my face for an hour. All right, I'm going to get off here. I'm going to get this posted to YouTube, and we will get ready for week 5 of the NFL slate. Thank you to anybody who watches this. Please like, subscribe, comment, anything that you can to help further my journey on this channel would be much appreciated. I will continue to try to get better and not just be a jackass on here talking sports, but a jackass that gives you good picks. So thank you to anybody who listens. Again, you can always catch me on YouTube. I will have these posted at Steele Talkin Sports. And you can follow me on Twitter at Steele_Talkin. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.